She couldn't scream. She couldn't run. Her husband was standing between her and the only door out, and no one in that diner was looking her way. So she did the only thing she could. With one finger, moving slowly so he wouldn't notice, she pressed a shape into the fog on the window glass. 4 seconds, that's all it took. The biker at the counter had seen that signal once before, and he'd spent 15 years wishing he'd acted on it. This time, he stood up. The chair scraped back slowly. Not loud, not dramatic, just the sound of a decision being made. Ray Callahan set his coffee mug down on the counter. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood up from that stool, turned around, and began walking toward the booth by the second window. The diner kept going around him. Bev refilled someone's cup at the far end of the counter. The couple near the door were still sharing their fries. The old country song on the wall speaker played on, low and unhurried, like it had no idea what was happening 6 feet away from it. Marcus saw him coming, and Marcus smiled. That was the thing about Marcus, the thing that had taken Claire 4 years to fully understand, and another 2 years to find the words for. He was always the most dangerous when he was smiling, because the smile meant he had already decided how this was going to go. It meant he had already calculated the room, already measured the threat, already concluded that he was the largest thing in it. He looked at Ray the way a man looks at a minor inconvenience. "Can I help you?" he said, easy. Warm. The voice he used with neighbors and co-workers and anyone whose opinion he wanted to keep. Ray didn't answer him. He looked at Claire. "Just that. Just." Looked at her. The way you look at someone when you want them to know that you actually see them. Not the version they're performing. Not the version they've been told to be. The real one sitting very still, hands folded on the table, jacket still on after 40 minutes inside a warm diner. "Are you okay?" Ray said. 3 words. Quiet. Direct. Claire looked up at him. And something happened in her face, something small and fast, like a door opening for just a second before someone remembers to close it. Because no one had asked her that. Not like that. Not in a long time. "She's fine," Marcus said, still smiling. "We just stopped to wait out the storm. Thanks for checking." Ray didn't look at Marcus. He kept his eyes on Claire. "I'm asking her," he said. The smile on Marcus's face didn't disappear. It just shifted, recalculated. The warmth stayed exactly where it was, but something behind it went very cold, very fast. He stood up from the booth. He was taller than Ray by several inches, broader through the shoulders. He positioned himself the way he always positioned himself. Between Claire and whatever he had decided was a problem. "I think," Marcus said, his voice still perfectly level, "that you should go back to your seat." Ray looked at him then, fully, calmly. "I think," Ray said, "that you should give her the keys." The whole diner didn't go quiet, but the small circle of air around those 3 people did. Bev paused at the coffee machine. The man 2 stools down glanced over without turning his head. Marcus let out a short breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. The expression of a man who has just decided to stop pretending. "You have no idea what you're walking into," he said. "Maybe not," Ray said. "But she does." He took 1 step to the side. Just 1 step. Deliberate. Unhurried. Placing himself not between Marcus and Claire, but between Claire and the door, opening a path. Claire saw it. Her hands unfolded from the table. She looked at the door, then at Marcus, then at the door again. Marcus turned to her, and when he spoke this time, the warmth was completely gone. What was left was something quieter and much more familiar to her, Claire. Just her name, flat, final. The voice that lived behind all the other voices. She stood up, her chair pushed back. Her canvas bag came off the hook on the side of the booth. Her legs were unsteady, not from fear, or not only from fear, but from the strange physical weight of doing something she had rehearsed in her mind 100 times and never believed she would actually do. She stepped out of the booth, one step, then another. Marcus moved toward her, and Ray was simply there, not touching him, not threatening him, just present, immovable. A wall that had chosen to stand in that particular place. "Don't," Ray said, one word. Claire walked. She didn't look back. She fixed her eyes on the door, the glass panel, the rain beyond it, the dark, wet parking lot that was somehow the most beautiful thing she had seen in years. And she walked toward it. 6 steps, 8, 12, her hand reached out. Her fingers closed around the door handle. She pushed. Cold air hit her face like a wave, rain on her jacket. The smell of wet asphalt and October, and something that took her a moment to name. Freedom is too large a word for a diner doorway in the rain. But it was the first honest breath she had taken in 4 years. She stepped outside. But to understand how Claire Ellison got to that door, you have to go back to the beginning of that evening. You have to go back to 6:47, when the storm was already heavy and Route 11 was empty. And the neon sign above Della's Diner was the only light for half a mile in either direction. Claire had not chosen to stop there. Marcus had. Their car, a dark blue sedan, registered in his name, though Claire had been making half the payments for 3 years, had pulled off the highway when the rain made the road ahead impossible to see. Marcus had looked at the diner, decided it was acceptable, and gotten out. Claire had followed the way she had learned to follow, quietly, without suggesting alternatives. Without reaching for the keys that were already in his pocket. She had always driven herself before they were married. Small things, you notice them later. Inside the diner, she had sat across from him in the booth by the second window and ordered nothing because he had ordered for her before she could speak. Tea, no sugar. He knew that. He was being thoughtful. And she had looked at the menu anyway, because looking at the menu meant looking at something that wasn't him. Under the table, her finger had traced a slow shape against her knee. Just movement. Just something to do with her hands. A habit she had developed somewhere in the last 4 years without noticing when it started. She had been a teacher for 7 years. 4th grade. She kept a small cactus on her desk named Gerald, and her students called her Miss E, and she was, by every account, steady and patient and good. She had built an entire second life inside that classroom, a life where she was capable and trusted and allowed to make decisions about small, important things. She had needed that second life, because the first one had been narrowing for years. The keys, the phone, the way he ordered for her in restaurants, the way he answered questions that were directed at her, the way the temperature of a room changed when she said something he hadn't pre-approved. None of it was loud. None of it left marks. All of it was, somehow, always her fault. She had told herself it wasn't that bad. She had told herself that for a very long time. Ray Callahan had arrived at Della's Diner 40 minutes before them. He had taken the stool at the far end of the counter, back to the wall, clear line to the door, and ordered black coffee and nothing else. He was 52 years old, and riding a route he had ridden many times before, in all kinds of weather, for reasons that changed over the years, and eventually settled into something simple. Movement helped. When things got loud inside his head, the road made them quieter. He had noticed Claire the moment she came through the door. Not because she was remarkable, because she was careful. The way she caught the door Marcus hadn't held. The way she scanned the room, not curious, not searching, but checking. The way she sat down and didn't take off her jacket. He had seen that pattern before. Once. A long time ago.
In a different diner in a different state. A woman at a corner table with her hands folded and her jacket still on, and Ray had looked at her and thought, something is wrong here, and then looked away, because it wasn't his business and he wasn't sure and he didn't want to be the kind of man who assumed.
3 days later he had read her name in the newspaper. He had never fully forgiven himself for the looking away. So when Claire pressed her finger to the foggy glass, slowly, carefully, making the shape he recognized the moment he saw it, he didn't hesitate. He didn't wonder if he was overreacting. He didn't look away. He put down his coffee, and he stood up. Marcus's phone buzzed at 7:19. Claire knew the sound. She knew all his sounds by then, the specific buzz of a call versus a message, the way he exhaled differently depending on who was on the other end, the particular quality of silence that followed certain conversations. 4 years of living inside someone else's rhythms teaches you things you never asked to learn. He looked at the screen. Something shifted in his expression. Not much, just a degree or two, the way a thermostat adjusts before the whole room changes temperature. "I have to take this," he said. He slid out of the booth, buttoned his jacket, looked at her in that way he had, not a threat, never openly a threat, just a reminder. A look that said, "I know exactly where you are. I know exactly what you're thinking. Don't." Then he walked to the far end of the diner, pushed through the side door to the covered porch, and was gone. The bell above the door chimed once. Claire didn't move. She sat very still and listened to the sound of the diner filling back in around her. The low music, the coffee machine, the couple near the front, laughing at something on one of their phones. Normal sounds, warm sounds, the sounds of people who had nowhere in particular to be and didn't mind. She counted to 10 before she let herself breathe differently. 90 seconds. That was what she had, maybe less. She knew this because she knew him. She knew that the calls he stepped outside to take lasted between 90 seconds and 4 minutes, depending on the subject. She knew that he always checked on her within 30 seconds of returning. A glance, a question, the particular he sat back down that communicated. "I'm watching. I'm always watching." 90 seconds. She had run this calculation before. Not here, not in this diner, not on this night, but in other rooms, other moments of accidental solitude. She had calculated distances and durations and possibilities the way a person calculates a route they're not yet sure they're allowed to take. The car was outside. The keys were in his pocket. Her phone was in her bag. She could call someone. She could call her sister in Carfield. She could call the number she had saved under a fake name 18 months ago after a school colleague had quietly written it on a post-it and pressed it into her hand and said just in case. But there wasn't time. Not enough time. He would see her on the phone through the window, and he would come back through that door before the line even connected. She looked at her bag, then at the door he had gone through, then at the window beside her. The glass was fogged from the inside. The warmth of the diner pushing against the cold October night, leaving a soft, pale condensation across the lower half of the pane. She could see the vague shapes of the parking lot beyond it, the dark outlines of cars, the rain still coming down in sheets, the blur of headlights on the highway in the distance. Her finger moved before she made a decision. That's the honest truth of it. There was no moment of resolve, no clear thought that said, "Do this now." Her hand simply lifted from her lap, and her finger touched the glass, and she began to trace. Slowly, deliberately, aware of every millimeter of movement. Thumb tucked into the palm, 4 fingers folding down over it. The signal for help, a gesture so small, so quiet, so easy to miss if you weren't looking for exactly that thing. She held it there for 4 seconds. Then she lowered her hand back to her lap, laced her fingers together, and looked straight ahead like nothing had happened. Her heart was hitting so hard she could feel it in her throat. Ray saw it. He had been looking at his coffee, or at the window, or at the middle distance that experienced travelers learn to inhabit on long rides. Not quite here, not quite anywhere, just existing in the space between stops. And then some peripheral things shifted, and his eyes moved without instruction, and he was looking at the booth by the second window, and he saw a woman with her hand raised to the glass, and 4 fingers folding down over a tucked thumb. He stopped. Everything in him stopped. Not from confusion. He knew exactly what it was. He had learned it years ago. Not from a manual, not from a training course, but from a phone call he had received on a Tuesday afternoon that had rearranged everything he thought he understood about paying attention. He knew the signal. He just hadn't expected to see it here, in a diner, on a Thursday night, in the middle of a storm. He sat very still for a moment and made himself go through the steps he had taught himself to go through, the ones that existed specifically to counter the voice that said, "You're imagining it. Don't make a scene. It's not your place. You're probably wrong." He looked at her hands, now folded in her lap, still. He looked at her jacket, still on, still buttoned after nearly 40 minutes inside a warm room. He looked at the empty space across from her. The man who had been sitting there was gone, but the coffee cup was still there, still steaming, meaning he hadn't been gone long and would be back soon. He looked at her face. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking straight ahead, expression neutral, shoulders slightly inward. The posture of someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible. Someone who has practiced being small in rooms where smallness was safer. Ray had seen that posture before. Once. Her name had been Donna. Ray had known her only slightly. She was the girlfriend of a man named Paul, who sometimes came around the garage where Ray worked in his late 30s, before the long rides became a way of life, rather than a weekend habit. Ray had met her maybe 4 or 5 times. Quiet woman, careful smile. Always wore long sleeves even in summer, which he had noticed and filed away and told himself was nothing. One evening, at a roadside bar outside of Caswell, he had seen her sitting alone at a corner table while Paul was at the pool table with his friends. She had her hands on the tabletop. Her jacket was on, and she was looking at Ray with an expression that he understood now, had understood for 15 years, was not passive, was not blank, was asking. Ray had looked away. He had told himself he wasn't sure. He had told himself it wasn't his business. He had ordered another drink and talked to the man beside him about something that mattered not at all. And when he looked back at the corner table 20 minutes later, Donna and Paul were gone. 3 days later, Paul was arrested. Donna spent 11 days in the hospital. Ray had driven to see her once after. She hadn't wanted to talk, and he hadn't known what to say. So mostly they had just sat in the same room for an hour while the television played in the background. When he left, she had looked at him from the hospital bed with an expression that held no accusation, which was somehow worse than if it had. He had replayed that corner table moment more times than he could count. The look she had given him, what it had been asking, what he had chosen not to see. Back in Della's diner, Ray's hand was still wrapped around his coffee mug. The ceramic was warm. The diner was warm. Outside, the rain was relentless. He watched Claire, hands folded, eyes forward, breathing carefully, and he watched the side door at the far end of the room, the one her husband had gone through, the one that could open again at any moment. The voice came again, quieter this time. You could be wrong. You could embarrass her. You could make it worse. He knew that voice. He had listened to it once. He thought about Donna's face in the hospital room. He thought about 11 days. He thought about the look that held no accusation. And he thought about the fact that he had learned this signal, had sought it out, had committed it to memory, had told himself that if he ever saw it, he would not hesitate. And that here, on a Thursday evening, in a diner off Route 11, in the middle of a storm that had stopped everyone in their tracks, a woman had pressed it into a foggy window with one careful finger, and then folded her hands in her lap and waited. Not for a hero, not for a confrontation, just for someone to see her. Ray set his mug down on the counter. The sound it made was small, ceramic on formica. Nothing remarkable, but Claire heard it. Her eyes moved, just slightly, just enough, to the counter at the far end of the room, to the man in the dark leather jacket who was no longer looking at his coffee, who was looking directly at her. Their eyes met for less than 2 seconds. Ray gave the smallest nod. Almost nothing. Just, I see you. I'm here, I understand. Claire's jaw tightened. She looked away, back to the straight-ahead nothing she had been staring at. But something had changed in her shoulders, some fraction of the held tension releasing, like a breath let out so slowly no one around her would notice. The side door opened. Marcus came back through, shaking rain off his sleeve, foam disappearing into his jacket pocket. He slid back into the booth, across from Claire, picked up his coffee, looked at her. Everything okay? He said. Fine, she said. He nodded, satisfied. The way a person is satisfied when the room is still exactly as they left it. He didn't notice the fog on the window beside him. He didn't notice that it had been touched. He didn't notice the man at the counter who had already put down his cup and was already, slowly, pushing back his stool. Marcus never saw any of that coming. He should have paid more attention to the rain. Ray didn't walk fast. He never did. In moments like this, there was no performance in it. Just a man crossing a room because a room needed crossing. It was a good smile. It always was. practiced over years into something that felt completely natural. Warm enough to disarm, wide enough to signal openness, calibrated precisely to communicate. I am a reasonable man, and I welcome reasonable conversation. And whatever you think you saw, friend, you've got it wrong. Can I help you? Marcus said, the same words he would use with a coworker, a neighbor, someone whose car had broken down outside his house and needed to use the phone. Easy, generous, faintly amused, the way a secure man is faintly amused by minor disruptions. Ray didn't answer him. He looked at Claire. She was sitting exactly as she had been sitting. Hands folded on the table, eyes downward, jacket still on. But there was something different now, a quality of waiting, like a person standing at the edge of a diving board who has not yet decided whether the deciding is already done. "Are you okay?" Ray said. Claire looked up, and there it was again, that flicker. That fraction of a second where something real moved across her face before the practiced neutral closed back over it. Not distress. Not fear, exactly. Something more complicated than fear. Recognition, maybe. The recognition of being seen by someone who was actually looking. "She's fine," Marcus said, the smile still perfectly in place. "We just pulled off the highway to wait out the storm. Thanks for checking on us." Use. The word was careful, deliberate. A small fence built in a single syllable. Ray kept his eyes on Claire. "I'm asking her," he said. The smile didn't leave Marcus's face, but something behind it made a calculation. Ray had seen that calculation before. Not often, but enough to recognize it. It was the calculation of a man who controlled rooms by understanding the rules of rooms, and who was now confronting the particular problem of someone who didn't seem to need the rules. Marcus set his coffee cup down, slowly, the gesture of a man demonstrating patience. "I think," he said, "that my wife and I would like some privacy. We're having a private conversation." "I understand," Ray said. He didn't move. Marcus's jaw shifted slightly. Microscopic. The kind of movement that Claire, across the table, would have recognized immediately, and that most people in the room would never see. "Then you'll understand," Marcus said, his voice still level, still warm, "that the polite thing to do is to go back to your seat and let us finish our evening." "I'll do that," Ray said. "Soon as I hear from her that she's all right." The word "her" landed in the space between them like something physical. Marcus turned to Claire. His expression when it was directed at her was different, still controlled, still surface calm, but with a layer underneath it that communicated with absolute precision the specific consequences of the next thing she said. Claire knew that look. She had been reading that look for 4 years. She looked at Ray instead. "I'm okay," she said. Her voice was steady, practiced. The voice she used when the answer needed to be convincing enough to close a conversation. Ray nodded slowly. He had heard that voice before. Not hers specifically, but that particular steadiness that costs something to maintain. The kind of okay that is built like a wall, not felt like a truth. "All right," he said, and then, without shifting his weight, without adjusting his position by even a single degree, "I'll be right over there if that changes." He pointed briefly toward the counter, not at Marcus, not at the room, directly at Claire. "Right over there for you, if that changes." Marcus waited until Ray had taken 2 steps back toward the counter. Then he stood up, not quickly, not aggressively. He rose from the booth with the measured ease of a man who had decided that standing was simply the more appropriate posture for this particular moment. He buttoned the middle button of his jacket. He was taller than Ray by 4 or 5 inches, broader at the shoulders, and he arranged himself in the aisle in a way that made the most of both facts without appearing to. "Hey," he said. Ray stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. He turned around the way he had walked over, without hurry, like the pace of the world was his to set. He looked at Marcus. "I don't know who you think you are," Marcus said. Still quiet, still controlled. The voice that was almost friendly, almost reasonable, almost patient, except that all the almosts were doing enormous amounts of work. "But you don't know anything about our situation. You don't know anything about us. And frankly, the way you just spoke to my wife was disrespectful." Ray said nothing. "She told you she was fine," Marcus continued. "I'm telling you she's fine. So the respectful thing, the appropriate thing, is to go back to your seat and let us have our evening in peace." Ray said nothing. Marcus waited. The silence stretched. And this was the thing that Marcus had not anticipated and was not, in this moment, entirely sure how to handle. He was very good at conversations. He had always been very good at conversations. He knew how to match a tone, how to redirect an argument, how to make a person feel heard, while simultaneously ensuring that the conversation ended where he needed it to end. But Ray wasn't having a conversation. He was just standing there, quiet still, watching Marcus with an expression that was not hostile, not aggressive, not even particularly intense. It was simply patient. The patience of someone who has been in enough rooms to know that silence, used correctly, is louder than almost anything you can say. Marcus had never been on this end of a silence before. He didn't like it. Behind Marcus, Claire had not moved, but her hands, under the table, had separated. No longer folded together. Resting on her thighs now, a small change. The kind of change a person makes when they are, very quietly, preparing. She was watching Ray. She was watching the way he stood, the way he didn't flinch, didn't justify, didn't apologize for his presence in the room. She had not seen that in a very long time. Someone simply occupying space without explaining why they deserved to be there, without checking whether it was allowed. She had forgotten that was something a person could do. Marcus turned back to her. "Claire," he said. "Quiet. Just her name. The version of her name that was not an address but a boundary. You are here. You are mine. You are not going to do whatever it is you are thinking about doing." Ray took one step to the side. A single step, lateral, positioning himself not between Marcus and Claire, but between Claire and the door. Not blocking, not forcing, just making it clear that a path existed, that the path had someone standing in it who was not going to move. Claire looked at the door, then at Marcus. His face had changed now. The surface warmth was gone. What was underneath it was quieter and more familiar, and made the air between them feel thinner somehow, the way air feels at altitude. Present, technically breathable, but requiring more effort than it should. "Don't," he said, one word, all the warmth gone from it. Ray said very calmly, "Don't talk to her like that." Marcus turned to him fast. The first fast movement he had made, the first crack in the controlled surface, and his voice dropped a register and lost its last pretense of social warmth. "You need to walk away," he said, "right now. You have absolutely no idea what you are getting into, and I am telling you, as clearly as I can, to walk away." Ray looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "I know exactly what I'm getting into." He turned to Claire. "You don't have to stay," he said. Simply, directly. No drama in it, no rescue movie cadence, no performance of heroism. Just a fact, stated plainly, by someone who meant it completely. "You can go, right now. I'll be right here." The diner kept going around them. Bev at the coffee machine, the couple near the door, the old song on the wall speaker, and Claire in the booth by the second window, with her hands resting open on her thighs and her eyes on the door, and 4 years of carefully maintained stillness beginning, slowly, irreversibly, to move. She stood up, not fast, not dramatic, the way a person stands up when they have been sitting for a very long time, and their body has half forgotten how. Her chair pushed back against the floor. A small sound, almost nothing, but in that particular circle of air it landed like a statement. Claire reached for her canvas bag on the hook beside the booth. Her fingers closed around the strap. She pulled it onto her shoulder. Marcus didn't move. He was watching her with the expression she knew best. The one that was not quite anger, and not quite calm, but something suspended between the two, waiting to see which way it needed to fall. He had used that expression for 4 years like a dimmer switch. Turned it up when she needed redirecting. Turned it down when the situation required him to look reasonable. Right now it was turned all the way up. "Claire," he said. Just her name. The way he said it, she had tried to explain this to her sister once, late at night on the phone, and had failed to find the right words. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening in any way that would register to someone listening from outside. It was just her name, said in a particular register, carrying a particular weight that 4 years had trained her body to respond to the way you respond to a hand on your shoulder in a dark room. "Stop. Stay. Remember who you are when I'm watching." She heard all of that in 2 syllables. She took the first step anyway. Step 1. Her left foot moved forward on the diner floor. The vinyl was slightly sticky near the booths. Years of use, years of spilled coffee and tracked-in rain. She felt it through the sole of her shoe. Specific. Real. She fixed her eyes on the door at the end of the diner, and she took step 1. Marcus said her name again. Differently this time. Lower. The dimmer switch at maximum now, past the point where it bothered to pretend it was anything other than what it was. Ray didn't speak. He simply stayed where he was. Between Marcus and the door, between Marcus and Claire's path, present and immovable, and asking nothing of her, except that she keep moving if she wanted to. Step 2. Step 3. Her bag was heavier than usual. She had packed for an overnight. They were supposed to be visiting his brother, 2 hours further down the highway, a visit she had been dreading for 3 weeks. Because his brother's house was smaller, and the walls were thinner, and there was no classroom to go to in the morning. No Gerald the Cactus on the desk, no 24 fourth graders who needed Miss E to be steady. She thought about that overnight bag in the trunk of the dark blue sedan. She thought about the fact that everything she had packed in it was replaceable. Step 4. Behind her, she heard Marcus move. Not toward her, toward Ray. The shift of weight, the sound of a shoe on the floor, the particular quality of air displacement that she had learned to track without turning around. Ray's voice, when it came, was the same as it had always been in this conversation. Unhurried, unafraid. "Don't," he said. One word. It was remarkable, she would think later, how much information a person could carry in a single word. Not a threat, not a command exactly. More like a fact being stated. This is not going to go the way you are planning, and we both know it, and there is no version of the next 30 seconds that ends well for you if you take another step in her direction. All of that in one word. She didn't look back. Step 5, Step 6. The diner was not large. She had clocked it when they walked in. Habit, the same habit that made her note where the exits were in movie theaters and which tables in restaurants had clear lines to the door. 20-something feet from the booth to the entrance. On any other evening, in any other life, that was 10 seconds of walking. A distance you cross without thinking about it. Tonight it was the longest distance she had ever traveled. Step 7. She passed the table where the couple had been sharing fries. They had gone quiet. She was aware of them in her peripheral vision. The young woman with her hand over her mouth. The young man half risen from his seat, uncertain what to do with himself. She didn't look at them. She couldn't afford to look at anyone except the door. Step 8. The woman with the flashlight book had closed her paperback. She was watching Claire walk with an expression that Claire couldn't fully read, but there was something in it that was not pity. Something older and more specific than pity. Understanding, maybe. The particular understanding of someone who has stood at a door like this one in their own life and knows exactly what it costs to keep moving toward it. Step 9. 4 years. The number moved through her mind on step 9, uninvited. 4 years of learning how to answer questions before they became problems. 4 years of wearing jackets indoors and ordering nothing, and letting him hold the keys and speak for her in rooms full of people who had no idea. 4 years of a classroom that felt more like home than home did, and a cactus named Gerald, and 24 children who looked at her like she was the most capable person in the room, because in that room she was allowed to be. 4 years of telling herself, it's not that bad. It's not what you think it is. You're being dramatic. He loves you. This is just how it is. 4 years of standing at hypothetical doors and not walking through them. Step 10. Her throat was tight, not from tears. Not yet, not here, not in this diner with these people. And Marcus still somewhere behind her. From something else. From the specific physical sensation of doing a thing your body has been bracing against for so long that the doing of it feels almost violent, even when it's the only right thing left. Step 11. She thought about the signal on the glass. The way her finger had moved before she consciously decided to move it. The way the shape had formed. Thumb tucked. 4 fingers down, and how she had held it for 4 seconds and then lowered her hand and thought, that was nothing. That changed nothing. No one saw. No one ever sees. And then the sound of a coffee cup being set on a counter, and a man at the far end of the room who was already looking at her. Step 12. Behind her, Marcus said her name a 3rd time. This time, it was different from the first 2. Not controlled. Not calibrated. Something had slipped in it. The very first crack in 4 years of polished surface. A hairline fracture running through the word Claire that carried something she had never heard from him before. Not anger. Fear. She recognized it because she had felt it herself for so long that she knew its exact texture. He was afraid, not of Ray, not of the diner, not of anyone watching. He was afraid of this, of her moving, of her continuing to move, of the specific horror for someone who has built their entire sense of self around the ability to control a room, of watching the room stop cooperating. She didn't stop. Step 13. The door was close now. She could see the rain through the glass panel, heavy, relentless, running down the window in long silver lines. She could see the parking lot beyond it, the dark shapes of cars, the blur of the highway in the distance. She could see the dark blue sedan parked close to the entrance, registered in his name, keys in his pocket. She didn't need the car. She didn't need the overnight bag in the trunk. She didn't need any of the things she had packed for a life she was no longer going to live. Step 14. Her hand reached out. Fingers closed around the door handle. Metal, cold, real, so real. The most real thing she had touched in years, maybe. Or maybe it was just that she was finally present enough to feel things properly. Present and moving and not asking anyone's permission. She pushed. The cold hit her all at once. October air, rain-soaked and sharp, rushing in against her face and her jacket and her hair. The sound of the storm filled her ears. Rain on the awning above the door, rain on the asphalt, rain on the roof of every car in the parking lot. Loud and clean and indifferent in the way that weather is indifferent, caring nothing about what had just happened inside that diner, about what 4 years looked like when they finally ended. She stood in the doorway for one breath, just one. Then she stepped out. The rain hit her shoulders, her hair, the canvas bag. She didn't run. She walked, because she was done moving through the world in the posture of someone who needs to be fast and quiet and invisible. She walked at a normal pace across the wet asphalt, and she did not look back at the diner, and she did not look back at the dark blue sedan, and she did not look back at any of it. Behind her, through the glass door, swinging slowly shut, she could hear Ray's voice, steady, unhurried, talking to someone. To Marcus, maybe. To Bev. To whoever needed to hear what needed to be said next. She didn't need to hear it. She already had everything she needed. It was raining on her face. She was walking. That was enough. That was, for right now, completely enough. Freedom is too large a word for a diner doorway in the rain. But it was the first honest breath she had taken in 4 years, and she breathed it all the way in. Inside the diner, nobody moved for a moment. Bev stood at the coffee machine, with her hand on the pot, and didn't pour. The couple near the front had gone completely still. The old song on the wall speaker played on, unhurried, indifferent, the same as it had been all evening. Marcus was still in the booth. He hadn't followed her. He was sitting very still, looking at the door she had walked through, with the expression of a man who has just watched something happen that his entire understanding of the world had told him couldn't. Ray walked back to the counter, sat down on his stool, put both hands around his coffee mug. The coffee was cold by then. He drank it anyway. Ray stayed in the diner for another 2 hours. Not because he had to. Because it was the right thing to do. To be present while the situation resolved itself. To give a statement to the officer who arrived 22 minutes after Bev quietly picked up the phone behind the counter and made a call she had been considering for the last 10 minutes of watching the scene unfold from 6 feet away. Marcus was still there when the patrol car pulled into the lot. He had sat back down in the booth after Claire walked out. Just sat down. Like a machine that had been switched off. The fight had gone out of him the moment the door swung shut, replaced by something that looked, from a distance, almost like confusion. Like a man who had run a program that had always worked before and was genuinely uncertain what to do when it didn't. Ray had watched him from the counter. He hadn't felt triumphant. He never did. In moments like this, there was nothing satisfying about watching someone like Marcus sit in a diner booth with the architecture of his control dismantled around him. It wasn't a victory. It was just a correction. A small, necessary correction in the direction of what should have been true all along. The officer's name was Reyes. Young. Thorough. She took Ray's statement at the counter while her partner spoke with Marcus in the booth. Ray told her exactly what he had seen, in the order he had seen it, without editorializing. The signal on the glass, the jacket still on, the pattern of behavior across 40 minutes of observation. He used specific language because specific language mattered. Not she seemed scared, but she did not remove her jacket in a warm room for 40 minutes and avoided direct eye contact each time her husband addressed her. Not he seemed controlling, but he ordered for her without consulting her, positioned himself physically between her and the exit on 3 separate occasions, and used her first name as a means of interruption rather than address. Officer Reyes wrote everything down. Before Ray left, she looked up from her notepad and said, "You knew the signal?" "Yes," Ray said. "Most people don't." "I know," Ray said. "That's the problem." He found Claire around the side of the building. She was standing under the narrow overhang above the service entrance, out of the direct rain, her canvas bag on the ground beside her feet. She had her phone in her hand. The number she had saved, under a fake name 18 months ago, was on the screen, and she had already made the call. And the woman on the other end had already given her an address 20 minutes away, and told her a room was available and that someone would be waiting. She looked up when Ray came around the corner. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The rain filled the silence, which was fine. Some silences don't need filling. Some silences are doing important work, and the best thing you can do is let them finish. "There's a shelter," Claire said finally. 20 minutes from here. "They're sending someone." Ray nodded. "Good," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Really looked at him the way she hadn't been able to look at anyone directly for longer than she could clearly remember. "Why did you know that signal?" she said. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he told her about Donna. Not all of it. Not the hospital. Not the 11 days. Not the newspaper. Just the corner table. The folded hands. The look he hadn't answered. Claire listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded slowly, like something had clarified, like the geometry of the evening had rearranged itself into a shape that made sense. "She taught you," Claire said. It wasn't a question. Ray looked at the rain. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She did." The car arrived 15 minutes later. A woman named Sandra, volunteer with the shelter, had been doing it for 6 years, had the particular warmth of someone who has sat with people in exactly this kind of parking lot, on exactly this kind of night, more times than she could count. She introduced herself to Claire with a handshake and no unnecessary words, and held the car door open without making it feel like charity. Claire picked up her canvas bag. She turned to Ray. "I don't know your name," she said. "Ray," he said. She nodded, held out her hand. He shook it. "Thank you, Ray," she said. He could have said many things. He could have said, "You're welcome," or "I'm glad you're safe," or any of the things people say in moments like this when they want the moment to mean what it means. But Ray had never been a man of unnecessary words. So he just nodded once, the same small nod he had given her across the diner, the one that meant "I see you," and let her go. She got in the car. Sandra pulled out of the lot. Ray watched the taillights until they disappeared into the rain on Route 11. Then he went back inside and finished his coffee. Now, before we go any further, there is something you need to know. The signal Claire used on that window was not invented for this story. It is real. It is called the Signal for Help, and it was created in 2020 by the Canadian Women's Foundation in response to a sharp rise in domestic violence during periods when people were confined at home with their abusers. It was designed specifically to be used in situations where speaking is not safe, where asking for help out loud would make things worse instead of better. Here is how it works. You hold up one hand, palm facing out. You tuck your thumb into your palm. Then you fold your 4 fingers down over your thumb. That's it. 4 seconds. One hand. No words. It can be done across a room, through a window, in the back seat of a car while someone else is driving, in a diner booth while a man is looking the other way. Since its creation, the signal for help has been used in real situations across dozens of countries. It has been recognized by strangers in grocery stores, on highways, in waiting rooms. There are documented cases of people who used it through car windows at highway speeds and were helped by drivers in other vehicles who happened to know what it meant. The signal works, but only if people know it exists. That is the part that Ray understood, the part he had spent 15 years understanding, ever since a Tuesday afternoon phone call and a woman in a hospital bed and an expression that held no accusation. The signal works only if the person on the other side of the glass is looking, only if they know what they're seeing, only if they choose not to look away. Most people don't know. Now you do. That night, Claire sat in a small room in a shelter 20 minutes from Della's diner. The room was simple. A single bed with a blue blanket. A window that looked out onto a small garden that was invisible now in the rain and the dark, but would be there in the morning. A lamp on the nightstand. A door with a lock on the inside that she could turn herself, that no one else had a key to. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She thought about the booth by the second window, about the menu she had stared at without reading, about the way the keys had landed on the table. "I'll hold on to these," and how natural it had sounded, how reasonable, how it had taken her until much later to understand that reasonable sounding is not the same as right. She thought about 14 steps, how long they had taken, how impossible they had felt from step 1, and how, by step 14, her hand was already reaching for the door. She thought about Ray, about Donna, who had sat at a corner table with folded hands and a look that Ray had spent 15 years answering, in diners and parking lots and quiet conversations, one person at a time. She thought about the fact that a woman she had never met, a woman whose name she had learned tonight for the first time, had, in some way she would never be able to fully trace, been part of saving her life. She reached out and put her finger on the window beside the bed. The glass was cold, faintly fogged at the edges from the warmth of the room. Slowly, she traced the shape. Thumb tucked. 4 fingers down, she held it for 4 seconds. Then she lifted her hand, not because she needed help, not because anyone was watching, but because the last time she had made that shape, it had meant, I am not safe and I cannot say so and I need someone to see me. And someone had. So she made it one more time, just for herself, just in the quiet of that small room with the blue blanket and the inside lock, to remember what it felt like to be seen, to remember that she had done that she had reached in the only way available to her, through a foggy window in a roadside diner on a Thursday night in late October. And that on the other side of the glass, someone had been looking. Some nights the rain doesn't just fall, it settles. It wraps itself around everything and refuses to let go. But eventually, always, eventually, it stops, and in the morning, the road is still there, and you can take it anywhere you want. Claire didn't leave because someone saved her. She left because someone saw her. That's all it took. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe one person's attention can change a life, subscribe to Heart Tales. We'll be here. Which moment hit you hardest? Tell us below. We read every comment. 2 more stories are waiting on your screen right now. We'll see you there.